Everybody, I see people are still joining in, some are on dual. Let me say good morning. My name is Henrik Kramberg Ausen. I'm the leader of the Nordic consumers in EY, and welcome to this webinar where we look up on the consumer behaviors, but also the responses to COVID-19 and other areas where we can explore and benefit from transformation. As we have seen in recent years, tax and finance departments are being disrupted and really need to transform to remain fit for the future, and also being able to be both competitive and compliant. But what does good look like? There can be many views on that, but today Claire has been so kind to join in and give her view on what good looks like. So let me hand over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Henrik, and good morning to everybody. Thank you also for joining this morning's call. So yes, we're going to talk about transformation of the tax function, which is something I talk about pretty much all the time. I'm a specialist in this area, but it might be a new topic for some of you. It might be one that some of you are already working on within your organizations. So let's kick off and let's think about reasons as to why the transformation of the tax function needs to happen, and why now is an important time. And then we'll think about what does that mean, what does that journey look like, and some ways that we at EY, my team, help with some of those transformations. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Thea, and the one after. Thank you. So thinking about, what are some of the macro and micro challenges that organizations are facing at the moment? COVID-19 obviously is a very clear one for consumer. That's obviously having, a big impact. In terms of what does that mean and how does that translate down into the tax function? Let's just look at some of those driving areas, some of those challenges. So in addition, we have the general digital disruption. So you'll see this throughout your industry. It also applies to finance, and it also applies to the tax function. So really looking at how organizations can really bring different technologies and different ways of working into their teams and into their sort of core functions of finance, including tax. One of the other areas that we're seeing change is the regulatory environment. So lots of changes amongst tax authorities where they are now making requests of companies to do things and transform the way they do things around tax. So for example, filing tax returns or tax information digitally or electronically, opening up some of their systems in some countries to have the tax authorities remove some of the information that they need to be able to use, and really a different way of interacting with that tax authority. And again, the multiple tax authorities that are across the world for the multinational businesses. One of the other important areas that is also changing at the moment is around talent and people, obviously wanting to maintain an agile workforce, and also having a good and well educated team within the tax function is extremely important. Recruiting junior team members who actually would like to remain in their role for more than 1 or 2 years is a challenge currently. A lot of the more junior colleagues, or let's just say that the younger colleagues, don't seem to want to have that sort of normal long career in an organization that we do, and a lot of our colleagues have that ambition to do. So really making sure that transformation sort of area is also covered when we're bringing that down into the tax function. Looking at some of the micro challenges, so macro is more the sort of the external, the micro now some of those internal challenges. So cost reduction, really a huge topic at the moment for many groups, and looking at how do you do more with less. That applies to the tax teams too. So how does the tax function, which is perhaps under some pressure from headcount or from external spend on advisors. How does that tax function continue to operate as normal? But also, how does it address the changes in the external regulatory world, so the changes to doing things for the tax authorities in a different way? How does the tax function also begin to incorporate some of the technologies which in time will bring efficiencies, but at the at the time of introducing them, they're often time consuming and difficult to bring into the tax function as within any part of a finance function or business. So those are some of the areas that we're seeing tax functions be challenged in. There are then also the areas which are sort of the business as usual type things, so the sort of irregular, thankfully, but they still come up. So things like corporate transactions, so mergers, acquisitions. It could be a change in leadership, so the CEO might change, the CFO, even the head of tax may change. So making sure that the tax function is able to address these challenges and transform as there are changes above. And then making sure that they're constantly able to maintain their focus on strong tax risk management, which is clearly one of those core functions. So managing the tax risk, managing the costs, and also creating value are those sort of three areas where we're seeing the transformation topic for tax functions. So that's sort of setting the scene as to why and how we're seeing transformations of tax functions pop up. So let's now look onto the next slide, and we can just think about some of the areas in which a transformation of a tax function can focus in order to demonstrate that it has, a very good connection to these four sort of circles that you can see on the screen. And really to enable the tax function to be a partner to the business. So each of the four circles there represent a different part of a connection for the tax function, which will enable it to better function and to really make sure that it's sort of covered all the bases and can really understand how to work for the future. So the first one is the organisation as a whole. So making sure that the tax team have got within their strategy and their objectives the similar broad objectives that the whole organisation has. And this is important so that the tax function can really reflect the the themes that the company is also striving for. And in consumer, that's particularly important. Obviously, the reputation of all organisations in consumer is extremely important. And that also would apply to any sort of tax topics that might hopefully accidentally pop up into media. So you do occasionally see that there are large tax cases which get into the news. Admittedly, it's rare, thankfully, but having a negative impact story in terms of your sort of your tax position or some tax planning that may have been done by the company, that's not great for your consumers who've got a choice in terms of where they want to spend their money. So making sure that the tax function is aligned to the overall organisation's values and strategy is really important. The next circle on there is around the sort of connection to the tax authorities. So I already mentioned how the tax authorities are really changing the way that they want organisations to work and to operate, and to give the information to them. Now, the other thing that's important, as you'll know from a tax authority relationship perspective, is that they're always interested in understanding what your organisations are doing from a tax perspective. Obviously, they have to check the right amount of taxes are being paid, but really maintaining a good working relationship with the tax authorities is important. So transforming your function to enable the tax teams to perhaps spend a bit more time on those sort of important relationships. And again, different countries have different, I'd say, sort of time requirements in order to do that, but making sure that any relationships with the authorities are efficient and good and working well is one of those sort of key design principles for a transformation. The next circle there is thinking about the organization's data and information. So obviously tax functions use information from the company's ERP systems to enable the calculation of tax liabilities. In order to do tax planning, they need to understand and have a lot of data and information from the organization. So really making sure that you've got people within your tax function who can get access to those important data, information, making sure that they're able to get it quickly and efficiently, and preferably in a format that's useful for tax. So often tax team members spend a lot of their days or weeks or even months trying to play the back and forwards of sort of information to and fro with either finance or other parts of the business to be able to get that information in the right format, the right level of detail, so that they can effectively use it for the tax purposes. So the better the connections are to getting good data and good information quickly, then the less time is wasted on that sort of less interesting task, but also enabling the better performance of the tax team. And then the final circle we have on there is around the stakeholders of the organisation. Again, making sure that your stakeholders, so be that the shareholders, again, that could be governments, it could be NGOs, making sure that you've understood what their agenda is and making sure that the tax function is carrying out it or playing its part within that area. So let's move on now to the next slide. So when we think about transforming tax functions, we're looking to really hit these 4 big yellow boxes. So bringing efficiency, bringing effectiveness, looking if we can see some tax savings, and also then lowering the costs of that function. So I'm not going to spend more time on this slide for now, but I may come back to it later. But those are the 4 sort of drivers, tax value drivers, for when we're thinking about, how can we do things differently in the future from a tax perspective, making sure we're efficient, making sure that everything we're doing is value adding, and really trying to minimize any of those tasks which are not much fun, let's be honest, for the people doing them. That sort of data shift, data change, trying to get things out of ERP systems into Excel, then taking it from Excel into another format to be able to use. So really making sure we're not spending a lot of time on those type of things, but instead focusing on those value drivers for tax. So lowering costs, working out, can you maximize any sort of tax deductions or tax credits, and using the smart brains of your tax team to do useful value added tax work rather than the less interesting side of things. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as we're working with organizations in order to help them to look at how to transform the tax function to cover all those things I've just spoken about, one of the things we have to do initially is look at the sort of the base state. So looking at what is the current tax function position. So obviously you can imagine that dependent on the size of the organization, and also on the geographical spread of that organization's operations, there will be different sizes of teams, and really different people in different types of tax. So you'll have your corporate tax team members, you might have specific tax accounting or tax provisioning team, there will be indirect tax, there may be customs, you will have quite a diverse bunch of specialists within the function, and also a diverse and busy list of things that team have to achieve. So when we look at what is that baseline, the sort of the base case of the current function, we use what we call the tax function analyzer tool. So this is a tool which enables us to work through an interview question set. I appreciate you probably can't see too much of the detail on that slide, but you can certainly get a flavour for it. So at number 1, we have a question set of interviews, an interview question set, which determines the current state level for the tax function areas. So on the left of that slide, you can see that we've got 7 areas of the tax function components. So policy, process, data, technology, organisation, people, and performance management. So within those 7 sort of key components, we have a few questions on each of those and examples of behaviours to enable us to work with you to decide whether in each of those areas the organisation's function is basic through developing up to advanced and then leading practice. So we go through some of those questions to sort of benchmark or at least get your current state analysis of where the tax function is today. And then also within each of those questions, we enable you to decide where you'd like it to be in the future. So it's a current state and future state tool to look at the maturity of the tax function. And then if you can see around number 2 to the right of that slide, we then get the assessment results come out of it. Often we can see it's the spider chart and bar charts and scores amongst those areas. And we're also able to benchmark your tax function against our database of other tax function analyzer sort of files on an anonymous basis, but we can cut that through industries, size of tax function to give you sort of a benchmark in terms of how is your tax function doing. And then after we've sort of had a look at the results together, we'll then look at what some of those initiatives could be for your tax function transformation to start to happen, essentially. So really looking then at what are those initiatives coming out to perhaps improve your tax function's technology score within the analyzer, or maybe looking at your processes within the tax function. There might be a lower score on some of those areas which you want to work on over the next 6 months or 12 months or a couple of years to be able to make a change and to begin that transformation. So this is a really useful tool that we work with our clients on to really get that sort of starting state, look at where those improvement areas are, and then we're able then to work and recommend the tax initiatives to enable and prioritize those initiatives to enable a plan for moving forwards. So let's look at the next slide, please, Thea. So the tax footprint review, this is another way that we work with tax functions in order to have a good understanding of actually what your teams are doing with their time. So the previous tool was looking at, your ambition for changing the tax function. So where do you want to go from and to? Looking at those sort of tax function components. Now, this tool is also one that we use at a similar time, actually, as we're doing some of the transformation support for organisations. And this is one where we work with the head of tax, sometimes with the finance leads, to get information from all of your sort of team members globally. So definitely from any tax team members, additionally from any people that carry out tax work. So often you will have sort of what we call a shadow tax function within finance. So they're not specifically tax people, but they're carrying out tax work. So whether they're helping do tax return filing or getting the information at year end or quarter end in order to enable the tax accounting to be done. So all those people who touch tax work streams, we'd also include their input into this review. So essentially what we do is we send out a survey, a questionnaire to all of those people who do tax, and we ask them across the different types of tax. So again, corporate tax, indirect tax, transfer pricing, tax accounting, whichever functions are being carried out, tax advisory as well, to really see how much time people are spending on those. And then we ask them a bunch of questions, so maybe 20 questions, asking how much time is spent. Are you spending money on tax software licenses locally? What about your tax advisor spend, if that's a figure that the head of tax doesn't already have? And the reason for doing all of that sort of survey and questionnaire gathering is to get a great view of actually what are the tax team globally doing? How long does it take? And are they focusing on the right value areas? So often once we get the data back in and we've run it through Power BI and we start to look at some of these screenshots that you can see on that slide, as we do that, it's really interesting for the head of tax to actually see where efforts and time of your team is being spent. So quite often it's quite a surprise to see that some team members in some countries are spending often disproportionate amounts of time on what would actually be genuinely low value items, but obviously they're complicated and there's a very manual process behind it, so things take a lot longer than would be anticipated by the sort of the tax leader, the head of tax back at headquarters. So this is a great output from this tool to really see what's happening where, and again it enables you to identify quickly which are areas to transform, to really look at focusing on either changing the way things are done, introducing a technology, maybe outsourcing some of it if it's taking a real lot of time, and really sort of enabling that transformation design to really target some of those sort of quick wins within that footprint review. So looking now at the next slide, once we've done that, so we've done our tax function analyzer, we may as well have in some cases done the tax footprint review, we're then able to sort of design jointly with the tax function a tax transformation roadmap. So an example of that is on the screen now. So we work through some of those initiatives which we'll have identified through doing the tax function analyzer and just talking and sharing the experience that we have from working with other tax functions as to what are good ways to change, to transform, and then we really do a prioritization exercise with the tax team to really look at what's possible when, how long is it going to take to transform some of the things, and really look at what is the right roadmap for that transformation. So in doing that, you really give the tax function a good a good plan for the next months or years, and it also gives the head of tax really a good sort of a measurement to see how the transformation is going, and actually it gives a really good update then to the stakeholders above tax within the organization in terms of one of those, what are you doing this year, how's your transformation going, what have you been busy with, then you're able quite easily to pull out the roadmap and show what's up, what's still to come, what you've already achieved, and the timeline for achieving any of those items. So that is the end of what I wanted to talk with you about. So the transformation of the function, how we do it, how we get there. It's lots of interesting parts within that. So I think we could go to the next slide, which I think is just to see if anybody has any questions or any comments or any thoughts that they'd like to to give on the topic. And if not, then I would probably hand back to Thea or Henrik.
Perfect, Claire. Thanks a lot. Quite interesting. And I really like this analyzer that you have built, and also what we have seen from clients benefiting from it, really getting a clear picture on where to put the effort, but also seeing what can come out of it in which time frame.
Mm-hmm.
But for all of you, of course, we have recorded this, so please share it with your colleagues as well. It will be on our YouTube channel, which we will link to. And if you have any questions or comments, please reach out. And I also know that our tax account leaders on your accounts will probably also reach out to you to have a dialogue to see how would this fit into your overall transformation strategy from taxes. But Claire, quite insightful, and as always, a pleasure. So thanks a lot. And everybody, please stay safe and reach out for any further dialogue that you would wish to have.
Thank you very much, Claire. It was very interesting.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.